Coming up next on Landscapes Through Time, David Dunlop travels to Contentment Island in Connecticut, where John Frederick Kensett painted his sublime landscapes.
Hi, I'm David Dunlop. I'm a landscape painter. And I'm here because American art history happens right here, in the form of John Frederick Kensett, just after the Civil War. It's around 1870. Kensett was a Hudson River painter. And as a Hudson River painter, he'd been an artist-explorer, an artist-scientist, and here he'd be something else. After the rupturing violence of the Civil War, America was looking for something else. It was looking for change. It was looking for serenity, for peace, for healing, and it would be artists like Kensett coming here who would try to provide some of that sense of healing through their art for themselves and for the rest of America. We're on the shores of the Long Island Sound. It's 7 miles out to Long Island, and it's about 30 down to the tip of Manhattan. Vincent Collier comes here with Kensett to find contentment. And that's what they call this place. Because before they got here, this was called Ox Pound, a little more aggressive. But painting is not only thing changing. Those steam trains, steel, iron, coal, those are the new industries. Carnegie, Mellon, Frick, these are the new powerful magnets, and they're traveling to Europe. And they're traveling over there to try to find culture and bring it back. But the Americans, the American artists, they travel over there as well, trying to get educated, bring back that same sense of culture. Around 1870, the Hudson River painters are no longer really needed. Photography had come along. And photography could do what the Hudson River painters did, only better. And Kensett's going to change the way he paints, just like George Inness changes the way he paints. It's going to be about poetry, mood, feeling. It's going to be about personal interpretation. That's going to be a condition for artists as a motivating force for the next 130 years, until today. It was on these rocks that Kensett sets up his easel. And this is where my students and I are going to set up our easels. And we're going to try to discover how John Frederick Kensett, Hudson River painter, painter of fact, becomes a painter of spirit, mood, and feeling. I'm right on a cliff edge. It's about 20 feet to the water. And right over there, 20 feet behind me, John Frederick Kensett had his studio. He paints this view. In fact, he owns the islands out here, the Fish Islands. And he looks out to Long Island. He's been looking in other directions too. He's been looking to history. In the 1840s, he travels on a ship with some other Hudson River painters, Cassilier, Durand, Rossiter, and they go to England and he looks at paintings. Now, in England, he'd seen Constable and he'd seen Turner. But in Paris, he meets Thomas Cole, who's also influenced by this painter, Claude Lorrain. Claude and Poussin, they set up the definition of landscape painting for all the modern landscape painters, that they're going to transport from Europe and superimpose on top of the American landscape. Here it is. You see this coulisse? It's this big dark shadow shape. It's over on this side. And it scoops down, and it has a little counterpoint over here, a little dark. See, we're all dark, 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 dark. And there's this circle of light right here. That's the whole idea of this sort of painting. And it goes back for centuries, back to the Romans. We need to get balance. It's a flawed sense of symmetry. It's a Renaissance principle. And that's what Kensett and the Hudson River painters rediscover in people like Claude and Poussin. Now, Kensett is going to just play with the shapes. Instead of a tree, it's a dark cloud. But still, it's this massive dark territory going off to this distant territory of light with a little echoing balance. Philip Stakonik, a completely different, well, not completely different, but a different type of landscape. And they've got that same ponding of light, the same distance, but here the distance goes all the way across. And the shapes, this big triangle of shapes, see that? They've got a big triangle. But the clouds assembling like this. This triangle of shapes and this zigzag, this serpentine movement, that movement back into space through dark and light, puddles of light. Like we would find out here, puddles of light. This is such a good surrogate for this experience. But he'd need another inspiration as well. And there in the 1840s, Turner is reinventing landscape. More color, more simultaneous contrast, which is opposite colors. Using two opposite colors intensifies the other colors. So if you use a yellow and a violet, the yellow feels more yellow and the violet more violet. This right down here, look at here's the break, that much landscape, that much sky. Sky, landscape, see that? And look, it's all broken, that edge is all broken, it's all dissolute, it's all dissolved. When you have dissolved colors, when you don't have edges, the sensation of space is amplified. And that idea would blossom here on the island of Contentment in 1870, 30 years later, into a painting like this. Transition into something tonalist, something more simple, because as Leonardo da Vinci says, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. First, the drawing. He's changed his format. And at the Goupil Galleries, when he saw Martin Johnson Heade's paintings, he noticed this. They were a little longer, a little more narrow, less boxy. And so he starts to do the same thing. He changes the ratio. Instead of a 2:3 ratio, in the old Clodion format, he changes it to a 1:2. That's a horizontal scan, serene. Remember those Dutch paintings, Philips de Koninck? Long, quiet horizon. As an engraver, that's how he was taught. All the Hudson River painters were taught to draw. Drawing was a fundamental part of their experience as painters. They built shapes, filled in the shapes, softened the edges. He amalgamates the masses, joins the masses together. So there's no individuated trees. So when he first comes here as a Hudson River painter, he's still invested in that tradition of Hudson River painting. And that slow evolution is to something simpler and simpler, more like that Turner that I just showed you. This is second generation Hudson River painter. Gifford, Kensett, Martin Johnson Heade. These are Luminists. These are artists who are interested in emoting a condition of light and an emotional condition. And for Kensett, that emotional condition is one of serenity. And that's what we've got here. Now to capture something like that, he still has the vocabulary of the Hudson River School. He still has the traditions of John Ruskin. He still has the traditions of Claude. They're still there, but they're going to be simplified, reduced. And he's going to use the same palette, a red oxide, a burnt sienna underneath. His friend Gifford would be using that palette. Maybe a little raw sienna, some white, the gamboge from Cambodia, little ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, new since 1810, vermilion red, coincidentally, Claude Monet, Renoir, Sisley, they're all in Charles Glaire's studio. They're all beginning to paint a completely different type of landscape painting, Impressionism, at this very moment. And yet here in the United States, he's cutting edge. He's a founder of the Metropolitan Museum, member of the Sketch Club, the Century Club. I've got a little medium. That's linseed oil. Now, I'm going to start to block, but before I block, I stain. I rub into the canvas, lay this in all over my linen, and fill that up. 1872, that's the year he dies, trying to save the life of a drowning Mrs. Collier. It would be just 6 weeks later that he would have pneumonia and die down there in New York. Gives you an idea of the sort of man he was, sweet-tempered, loving. Everybody liked this guy. He was a progressive, theologically, intellectually, sort of transcendental, Ralph Waldo Emerson. social liberal. He'd been an abolitionist. He's gone out west with his friends Worthington Whitridge, Sanford Gifford. I'm just going to rub this in, as was the tradition. I think I need a little raw sienna up here, something a little yellower. The vocabulary of forms is in your fingertips. Whether or not you're Chuck Berry or you're John Frederick Kensett, it's in your fingertips. Kensett is still rooted in observation. Try as he will, he still puts the islands in. But look, you already, because you've seen the painting, can start to see in, sense the space without me doing anything else. And as I slowly build up using big brushes, synthetic sable brushes, not the kind of brushes he used, I'm loading up with this ultramarine blue, and when it hits, look at that, when it hits the red oxide, this inorganic earth color, it goes to this pewter gunmetal color, this blue-gray. Rembrandt does this, calls it color breaking. This is an old technique. And the top edge is very feathered and broken, because a broken edge gives more volume, gives a greater sense of space. A sharp, hard edge, that's an abrupt transition. An abrupt transition does not give you a sense of space, it gets you a sense of something. Because of the absence of subject matter, the pared down quality of these paintings, after Kensett's death, when they're auctioned off, art critics are saying, well, they have all of the finish qualities of a finished Hudson River painting, of an exhibition painting, but there's not enough in them. And they couldn't decide, were they sketches or were they finished paintings? Because he's running ahead of art criticism. They're going to have to catch up to him. So far, I'm just using two colors of the transparent red oxide and ultramarine blue and white, and a little bit up here of the raw sienna. Really limited palette, even though it's a complementary palette. In other words, this blue and yellow orange. I'm going to clean the brush on my paper towel, and if I sense there's some contrary color in here, and there's a little bit of green on this brush, I'm going to kill the green on this brush by what? By putting a little bit of this vermilion on the brush that's red opposite of green. Notice that the color here is not the same as the color up there. When I hit it here, it looks lighter because it's on a white ground here, it's on a darker ground here. And I'm scumbling around, preserving a little bit of that glow on that edge so that there's a little halation on that edge of cloud. I'm going to flutter a little bit here. See this transition? Darker to lighter. Now I'm going to flutter in by removing some paint. This is subtracting the paint, adding light. He knew this, which is why the paintings were so thin and luminous. Every time you add paint, you subtract light. Mix more colors together, have a more complex palette, you subtract light. Now this multi-directional effect of light coming through, see those little thin marks where the light is even stronger. And right on that horizon, I'll even pull a little bit of that reflected into the water. The contrast out here is becoming a little more sharp as the light begins to be a little dimmer. Turn down the light and you've turned down the color. You start losing the greens out in the islands. It's an actual change in how we neurologically perceive with our vision the space in front of us. I'm going to make this bar a little heavier blue, and that creates a little greater contrast. Now if I drag my brush softly back and forth over, I can blend the colors even when, this is the virtue of oil painting, is to blend color so that the space acquires a different sense of motion. As you dissolve edges, not only do you create space, but you create a sense of motion. The part of our brain that says space, motion, is different than the part of our brain that reads words. Space is by soft, broken edges. And the Impressionists would really punch that up. Soft, broken edges. But he's already adventuring with the idea. And a slow transition between territories, that evokes space. An abrupt transition, that gives you something. What is a something? Well, a something is something with edges, and an edge would be an island. I'm going to shift to a round brush, and I'm going to make a stronger neutral tone. Now, he knew he wasn't painting trees. He's painting a territory that suggests treeness or islandness. And the reflection isn't quite as pronounced, and it just runs right on down and breaks up. And that reinforces the idea of a horizontal plane that you can travel across. Now, see, this is on this plane. If I go just up a little bit, it'll feel as though there's something else behind it, right? Oops, a little too dark. And this brush can't hold an edge. And I want a brush that can hold an edge. See what you can do with the edge of your brush? To drag that island out, I'm going to do the same thing. He could take license with where he needed it because he's constructing a balance. He's not pursuing the kind of scientific resemblance that he was pursuing as a Hudson River painter. I'm going to put a little more light up here. I'm pushing the contrast so that these separate a little more. Think of the world in transition. The rails, the steamships, the geology, the meteorology, the new sciences. This is the time of Darwin and Wallace and evolution. It's being introduced. These are hot topics. And there's an accommodating theology for this too, for metaphors. And that's part of what this is about, painting with metaphor, passing off of the storm. I'm going to introduce some of that blue-gray that was here up in here. As I do this, thinking of his passing off of the storm, I'm looking at this ever-changing, dynamic condition. He's going to, of course, do his study here and then finish the painting in his studio. Balance. He needed to find an inner balance, and he found that balance through the painting. We try to find that. It gives unity, it gives meaning, it gives contentment to our lives. Pleasure in this moment connected to a meaningful goal. That's happiness. It's a principle of continuity, that it would go and stop and disappear, be obscured, and yet the place has no horizon in places and a horizon in places. It has possibilities, it has limitations. His limitations were of his time. The ideas weren't ready. They were percolating in France. They were percolating here. In his last final summer, he's able to make 38 of the most meditative, personally introspective paintings that I think America will experience in the 19th century. I'm going to go see what Kathy is doing. She's painting and exploring this same coast, but right over here. Kathy, you're able to evoke beautiful textures here and nice modulations of tone. Right now what happens is these angles are pretty much the same. So I'll change the pitch of this angle. Let's see what happens if we can just carry more drama down into here with a longer nose to this rock. So we could just bring up some of the rock like this, and then we'll simplify it down in here. What I mean by that simplification is I'm just going to come up and cut an edge that is a little more continuous. And I'm going to push this tree right down into the rocks so it doesn't seem to be sitting on top of the hill. Yes, Kensett's old pine was right here, right where this little tree is. And I understand up until a couple of years ago that old pine was still here.
I remember there were those kind of trees here.
Now we'll just shorten it up a little bit, just as we're going to play with this too. I'm going to bring this down, deeper down, down, more dramatic. So it's the long sweep. Now we'll pull up that blue. And by making this background even grayer, it's going to go back farther too. I'm going to get this to be the opposite color. See how that is so beautiful with it? Let's try more of it, just because it's so appealing.
Yes, it is. More bluey.
I'm going to dip into your medium here and into your white. Steal some of that. Is that Schevening blue light?
Yes.
With a little bit of ultramarine. I'll make it a little more pink as we go up too. Now I'm going to push this down so we get this to come down even further. Get rid of that right there.
It already looks a lot better.
A little deeper at the bottom, graduating up. Now we're going to graduate into the pink. Now there's a pink made of those two reds. Now see how I'm blending them? Mm-hmm. We're going to blend that up. See how that does that transition and pulls you back into space? I'm going to go into that sky, which is a little lighter still than the water. And I have choices. I'm not at the midpoint. I'll either be above the midpoint or below the midpoint with this water. I have a couple of options. If I went up here, I'd have more of this color, but I can use some of the blue in the sky to give me push for this, so it propels itself this way. So maybe we'll just let it sit there and go into the sky, and just a touch of yellow to it.
I'm always concerned about trying to get my sky in first, if I can, because I usually end up by wiping things out if I put it in at the end. And starting all over again.
Well, you can go either way.
Either way.
Yeah.
I can see how the island on the background will be easier to put in right now.
Won't it be? It almost tells you that it's there without even putting it in. Let's go a little deeper up here. Now that real gray, that's because there's still a lot of transparent red oxide. Let me pull some more of that out. That gave me just too much pewter. It's a nice glow though, isn't it?
It is a nice glow.
A little deeper. Ultramarine blue is happening way up there with this. Way up here, we get a real intense blue, and I'm going to graduate that down. I'm going to transition between the two.
I'm getting better at doing that by changing my brush strokes.
Yes, and it's subtle graduation of value. See how we're transitioning down into here? Lighter still. Come on, pink. Because I'm going to pull down from that into here, and I'm going to put this in here. See how that gives the glow of the sky? And now we'll blend those lights together. That beautiful reverse sunset light. You could see that soft distance already start to, it almost says, well, you know what to do with me. Very, very pale and discontinuous. See that? Just barely there. And now we're getting that feeling of that sunset. Now to layer a color on top of a color and not pick up much of what's underneath, the trick is to make that color oilier. So if I want to lay down a white cirrus type cloud like that, see how that's out there? I can go right down into the paint. We'll go back into here and we can just do a lot of these. Counterpoint, lots of different kind of cloud formations.
Yeah, you could also do it by lifting out, couldn't you?
You could. You can go either lift or you can add, or you can do both. We can do both, but they just give us that animation. It's that space now has got all these diagonals. Notice they're running at a counterpoint to this diagonal. And you know, one last thing is if I just put a little bit of red, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red, a little bit of red, a little bit of yellow. It's a medium because right out there in the distance, there's a bead of light. So we've got the counterpoint, we've got the complementary color to this color, pushes the rock right toward you. Simplified all this space, which of course that was Kensett right here, is simplify the space, let me feel the atmosphere, let me feel the mood.
It's much more dramatic and has a lot more mood to it now.
It's fun to paint with you.
Oh, thank you.
It really is. Henry Fuseli had given some advice to Turner, the great English landscape painter. And it was, of all the uninteresting subjects, that of landscape painting was probably the most uninteresting. When it was concerned with the tame delineation of a given spot. And Kensett took that to heart. Because here, he transcends place by finding in himself and his experience of contentment a new direction for American painting. It's almost a spiritual awakening in the painting. Something subtle, something quiet. Luminism, tonalism, something more essential, less about the stuff. This is a new era. It's the end of the Civil War. And it would take people with the imagination and sensitivity of Kensett to point American painting in a new direction. And it happened right here. I'm David Dunlop. I'm a landscape painter.
On the next Landscapes Through Time, David Dunlop follows in the steps of the Hudson River painters to explore the majestic Catterskill Falls.